Hello, and welcome to the Enterprise Automation Excellence Podcast, hosted by Enterprise Management Associates. As a leading IT analyst firm, we provide deep insights across IT and data management technologies. In this podcast, we explore how automation drives business processes, analytics, development, and infrastructure. Join hosts Dan Twing and Tom O'Rourke as they discuss the evolving automation landscape, share strategies to optimize your tools, and guide strategic decisions for your automation portfolio. Now, let's dive into the world of automation excellence.
Hello, and welcome to the Enterprise Automation Excellence Podcast. I'm Dan Twing, and I'm here with my co-host, Tom O'Rourke. And Tom, as we alluded to last time, we were going to spend time with this episode to talk about your time in Las Vegas at the Gartner I&O conference.
Yes, this was a 3-day event. The audience for I&O is really chief technology officers, the head of technology, infrastructure, and operations within an organization. The overall vibe was pretty optimistic, but I think also it's worth noting that the speakers from Gartner, the vendors who spoke, the other attendees who I spoke with, there are some challenges that we are addressing in the infrastructure world right now. Not all of us have strategic influence on what's going on at the top level. We are hearing, though, coming down from the C-level and the board, frustrations about the cost of the cloud already and worries about the cost of AI, failures of major projects, and in particular, that few automation projects have exceeded expectations from a leadership perspective. And there's, the ongoing balance to velocity and scalability while maintaining reliability and resilience, the disruptions that take us off of our plan for the week or plan for the day around security. And Gartner also highlighted the disruptions that are coming in on the vendor side. There were a number of sessions focused on vendor management, looking at what's happening as there are mergers and acquisitions in the market, looking at the vendor-driven changes to licensing and pricing. It was a very broad conference. It went deep in a number of areas, but there were up to 10 parallel tracks at the point of each session. And so while I got to 30 sessions over the course of the 3 days, I've had to go back and look at the slides and watch some of the videos from the session to catch up on the things that I missed along the way.
Well, when we were talking earlier in our little pre-planning session, you sort of boiled that out to 5 topics.
Yes. So first up, AI is on everybody's mind right now, and generative AI for infrastructure leaders. I want to start with Gartner has done their traditional hype cycle. That's the big curve. Everything goes up, up, and up, and then there's the trough of disillusionment. Most of the AI products are still on their way up to the top, but they are starting to see a few things fall into that disillusionment stage. And they anticipate that there are going to be a lot of places where, at least in the short term, these products come up short on the expectations, the wishes of some of the people who are bringing them in. From a priority perspective, they advocate looking at generative AI-enabled applications and retrieval augmented generation as 2 technologies that are likely to have significant impact for infrastructure and operation in the next couple of years. But highlighted through multiple sessions, there's a huge gap right now between POCs that seem sort of successful and the struggle to get these things into production. So for I&O leaders, right now, the key takeaways, look at how you and your team can use these tools to help you with your day-to-day jobs, but be skeptical of promises that there's anything out there from the vendors you use that are going to be game-changing for you. And beyond that, the usual risks and challenges that you've already heard about elsewhere apply. But the last piece to stress in this is what Gartner is seeing, what they're hearing from talking with customers who have moved quickly into generative AI, is that there's an uncertain total cost of ownership. The estimates can be 5 to 10 times off, and it's never lower. And that the money has to come from somewhere, which means it's going to come out of the rest of the budget.
Interesting. I have seen examples of very useful things, but it seems to be more like point solutions that help along the way. But if you rush in and think it's going to, like you said, a game changer, yeah, I haven't witnessed that yet in any of the conversations that I've been having.
Yeah, I talked to a couple of vendors who are, looking at how they can bring AI to incident response, to take what they already have in terms of observability and collect that data and produce the initial incident report, which is always a huge time suck for the people who are trying to recover from an incident. So that's fantastic, but that's also really narrow, and it's not something that you can just take what has been put together and go and present it as, here's what happened, here's how we're going to solve it, and go and close the door. But if it saves you from a half a day to a couple of days of time pulling things together, then that's fantastic, and that goes into the everyday category.
So what else was on the list?
All right, so next up is our sweet spot, automation. And Gartner's lead going into this is don't automate, orchestrate. Fundamentally, the key session and the specialized sessions about it, we're looking at ways to get more value out of automation. Now, Gartner has tightened up their definitions. They're using the word automation as something tactical, looking at a set of tasks, and orchestration, they're positioning as strategic, being more process-focused. Underneath that, we challenge to balance it. The stress here is focus on value as the customer sees it, their challenges, their bottlenecks, automating their processes. And looking at orchestration not as a set of one-offs, but how do you build up a set of repeatable mechanisms, templates, and checklists that you can use to automate more efficiently, to be able to move to more of a DevOps way of thinking about this, where you're iterating on what you're building out. If you're working with a business owner, start with the simple core use case and then get into the special cases. And, this only happens on February 29th and those other specialized areas. And look at how you can build up a set of tools and documentation so that you can measure your velocity and you can see how you can improve these things over time to make what Gartner calls smart choices. I think these are both straightforward and sometimes non-obvious, but to make sure you have an inventory of the existing tools and staff that you have available to you. Look at how you can go and encourage reuse over spending the time to try out and adopt new tools and finding ways to standardize everywhere you go. Now, I was saying to you earlier, I'm a former development manager, and I think a lot of the framing of all of this from Gartner is to start to think about automation as a development skill set within your team and how you carry that out yourself, as well as how to help the citizen developers that we talked about in the HCL session in the prior episode in this.
Well, and that kind of leads right into your third one, which was adopting agile practices, right? I mean, those are heavily linked, really.
Yes, and Gartner has been talking about agility and infrastructure and operations for a while, but I think that from working with their clients, from their learnings, they're seeing how to carry this forward into a form that lots of us can go and use. So I will say that the first piece of this is looking at how to go and build out the infrastructure and moving towards an infrastructure as code mindset for how you're going to do things. Infrastructure as code enables standardization, it enables automation, it reduces risk, and it improves security outcomes. The final session that I attended at the end of the conference was talking about paths to address the problem that organizations are having today, keeping up with CVEs and patching. And really, the only successful solution that is out there is a solution based on infrastructure as code in order to be able to accelerate how quickly you can be able to push a fix out into your environment. It also means that you need to start to develop a product mindset. And that's, I'm going to throw it out here. I'm going to lay out more of this and come back to it. Second piece of this is expanding the adoption of site reliability engineering. This is something that Google gained a lot of fame for probably 5 to 7 years ago, and I think it has matured enough that it is a approach that will work for many infrastructure organizations. Key to that are being able to not just measure what's happening technically, but having the measurements of customer experience and using that as the elements of how you are improving reliability. Observability is, I think this is one of a very strong area. It's building on what's already been done in data analytics and machine learning and the adoption of AI. And then incident response. And again, from a DevOps mindset, moving toward making sure that you have a retrospective to frame what you learned and how you're going to quickly go and put that back out into what you're doing. Then a big piece in all of this is platform thinking. This is a whole episode for 2025. I'm just going to talk about a little bit of it. It is at its core rethinking how you organize your teams to be able to move from the legacy environment with all of the challenges it presents into a greenfield future environment, addressing the platform not just as a whole bunch of components that you've inherited, but taking a broad look at it and driving this in terms of a technical architecture that fits the particular needs of the organization, and ultimately tying that into thinking about your platform, the technologies and services that you're delivering to the rest of the organization with a product management mindset. The benefits that are promoted out of this is allowing you to get faster business outcomes, improving standardization, expanding the self-service capabilities in all of this, and with this, moving more quickly toward the greenfield environment that you desire to be in, rather than having to deal with a whole bunch of one-offs, the technical debt that you feel is holding you back.
Well, yeah, and you get that product mindset, you start to look at reusability, right? And as you get the standardization, there are certain aspects of every process that if there are standard modules, that makes it easier and quicker to address the next process, but those core things sort of follow those guardrails like we were talking about, which would also enable citizen development, as we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, one piece of this is thinking about delivering a thin set of services that just because you are a Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure, shop in your environment, you don't need to make all of the capabilities of both of those massive cloud environments available to your user set. Figure out what is needed there, offer that through, and leave the rest of it as items to be discussed if there's a request for it, but not automatically carried forward.
That's three of your big topics. What else did you have as your takeaways from the show?
So, item 4 is digital employee experience, or DEX. And I'll confess that this was new to me, but the relevance of all of this is, Gartner does a very, very good job of tying themselves to what are the problems that business leaders see out there. And one thing that they found out is that 80% of the board members that they have surveyed say that business disruption caused by skill shortages is a top workforce risk, and therefore their expectations on the C-suite and the technical leaders is, you need to go and address this workforce risk. Now, there's a whole range of items in all of this, but I will say that it is foundational to the business transformation that automation brings. You can't achieve your transformation goals without making sure that you have addressed the modernization of employee tools. You've acknowledged that there are new ways of working out there, from working anywhere, being digitally connected all the time. Also, the impact that this will have on retention and hiring, because it improves productivity, it improves satisfaction. And so, takeaways out of all of this, Gartner framed it into adaptive resourcing, but for an infrastructure or an automation leader to set aside time towards skill development, to look at how to upskill or reskill the people that you have, because that's going to go a lot faster. It's a lot more efficient than trying to go out and hire. That if you're looking to hire for, somebody with a skill set in demand, you might have to wait, 6 months to a year. And so ask yourself, be pragmatic. Could you skill some of your team that you already have to do this faster than you can go and hire somebody new?
Well, and I think in many cases, what could be accomplished with AI is to help those employees as they're trained to upskill, is to give them tools that help them not only get there, but do the job. And, common phrase around the AI is, AI isn't going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use it is going to take your job, right? And I think in terms of where those gaps are, rounding out the team with the right set of tools and training and best practices, is all part of bringing those skill sets up with the staff you already have.
Right. And Gartner has done surveys in that area. And right now, only about a third of the enterprises that they've surveyed have empowered their employees to go out and use AI, to explore it as ways for them to do their jobs better. And so I think as, an automation or infrastructure leader, you need to think about whether you would prefer to control who gets to use AI and when, or if you want to give people time to go and learn these tools and bring back the skills that they've developed and teach it to the other people in the organization.
This kind of leads right into your fifth one, which is the sort of technical leaders stepping up outside of their comfort zone, right? And focusing on business needs. If I captured that correctly from our earlier conversation, I know for myself in leadership roles, there are times where the better results have come from me just stepping back and letting folks experiment, right? There are times you can do that. There are times you can't. But I think that was a great suggestion you just made to, leave some room for experimentation. One of the things that I heard from the time I was with HCL in Italy is that they have implemented with their team what they call thinking Fridays, and none of the developers are expected to do work towards development goals on Friday. They're allowed to use that time to think, experiment, and they have seen productivity increases by not counting on that 20% of the work week as pure development time.
Yes, and I've had similar experiences along the way. I think it is counterintuitive to some managers that by taking people off the floor, so to speak, and giving them time to explore, to learn, spend time to exchange the things that they've learned with others, you can actually get a lot more out of your staff, and you'll have higher retention levels than if you simply make sure that you count the 37 and a half hours that you want to find them in their seats and typing away. And in fact, when I saw that digital employee experience was on the agenda, I was suspicious that this was going to be a new set of tools to measure how people were working, how fast were they typing, how quickly were they addressing a ticket and moving on to the next item in their queue. And so it was really a wake-up call for me. It's an area I'm going to do a little bit more digging on as well. Let's hit the fifth topic, technical leadership. I think I will, stress again, because this flowed through the entire conference. Technical leaders need to frame the way that they are looking at their environments in terms of addressing business needs first. They need to continue to develop a more strategic viewpoint. The fact that many infrastructure and technology leaders aren't invited into strategic discussions is in part because they haven't shown that they have the ability to think strategically. Becoming more value focused, understanding not outcomes, not as the project is complete or we've now updated 247 servers, but what is the value that was achieved? Why does updating 247 servers have any meaning at all to the business? And if it didn't have meaning, were you spending your time on the right things? I think, within that, looking at the soft skills, there were a number of discussions on how to work with your boss and your boss's boss, up to the top of the leadership chain to build their confidence and gain their trust. And, in the end, if you learn to, understand what the business needs are and you communicate back the value that is delivered in the context of those business needs, then I think that's going to go a long way toward building that confidence and gaining trust, which will get you the opportunity to step into bigger roles with more impact.
Yeah, I think it's important to always remember what your organization's primary focus is, who their customers are. And it can be easy to forget that when you are in operations, specifically IT in general, but even more specifically in operations, because you end up really being focused more on, compliance, availability, and security issues, which are all important and important to the business. But as you're looking at new automations, that might be a really good moment to step back and think about the business and how these things will help the primary focus of everybody being there.
Exactly. And it's not always easy to make all of the connections there. But I think as a takeaway, if you're not sure of what the connection is from your automation team to the business, then set aside time in January to go figure that out.
Well, I think this was a great recap of your time at Gartner, and certainly we will have an opportunity with future episodes to take possibly each of these topics. Certainly, we know we'll be spending more time on automation and orchestration and how that may change around agile processes and that product thinking. I think there's a lot here that will drive many of the conversations we'll have next year.
Yes. And there were a few other pieces that I've put aside here to keep the episode to this length, but I will include a few links on the conference as well as on the 3 guest keynotes for the session, who each in their own way carried this along in a way that was thought-provoking for the audience, and in follow-ups can be thought-provoking for you if you want to go and learn about it. So with that, I want to thank everybody who's listened through to the end. As always, to subscribe, you can go to em360tech.com. You can find the podcast out on all of the regular podcast syndicators, Apple and iHeart and YouTube and Spotify. And if you have feedback on the episode, if you have questions on this episode or anything that we've talked about, then our email address is eaepodcast@emausa.com. And Dan and I are also out there on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Dan and Tom, for your insights on today's topic, and thanks to our listeners for joining the Enterprise Automation Excellence podcast. If you're a technology or operations leader looking to enhance your automation strategy, stay connected for more expert insights. Visit enterprisemanagement.com to learn how EMA can support your automation initiatives and check out more episodes for in-depth discussions and industry trends.